Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marlos COF, and I'm going to be talking about happiness and expectation. So, happiness is probably the most coveted thing everyone is looking for. Everyone wants happiness. For some people, it's harder to achieve happiness, and for some, it's easier given certain circumstances. And happiness can be elusive sometimes, and so it's hard to find a solution to easily obtain this happiness. So I'm here today to assert my main thing, which is just lower your expectations and you will have a happier life. All right, so my first secondary claim is that contentment is achieved by exceeding one's expectations. In August 4th, 2014, an experiment conducted by Dr. Rob Rutledge at the University College of London revealed that happiness is measured by not by how well things are going, but by how well things are going, the magnitude of something, of how an event or circumstance is going, how it went beyond someone's expectation. So the definition of happiness is how well something exceeded one's expectations. That magnitude is the measure of happiness. Dr. Rutledge goes to say that having low expectations increases the likelihood of such an outcome exceeding those expectations and positively impacting our happiness. This is not to be inferred that lowering our expectations to zero will yield maximum happiness. That's not what I'm saying. It's impossible for someone to have zero expectations about life. Everyone has reason and morals and values, and those are what determine one's own reasonable expectations pertinent to themselves. So, but that someone's reasonable expectations isn't necessarily what's realistic. It's reasonable for someone to think that washing our hands prevents us from getting sick while eating food. Is that realistic? Not entirely. It just gives us it lowers the chance of getting a disease or getting sick. Washing our hands doesn't necessarily prevent it. People wash their hands and they get sick from something beyond their control. And so people don't wash their hands and they don't get sick. Even in this class, our professor is expecting, it's reasonable for him to expect that we're giving good speeches, but is that realistic? That's sort of a joke, but but in lieu of that, we can apply that to college. It's reasonable for us to think that getting a degree will land us a better job in the future. But is that realistic? Not entirely. Many people have gotten a major in something and they're stuck not finding a job. People have gotten a college degree and haven't gotten a college degree and they're really successful and wealthy. So don't let the high expectations of someone else that they have reached, don't let that high expectation dictate the expectation that you should have, and consequently dictate your amount of happiness. Keep your expectations low, keep them realistic, and that's how low expectation increases happiness. Now we go on to the second one, where we look at now high expectations and even normal expectations, and how they can decrease our amount of happiness. Having a high expectation and striving for that, the risk and consequence of striving for that high expectation is too great for the potential amount of happiness that you could get from striving for that high expectation. So for the example of college, there's a lot of resources that are going from us that are going into pursuing the high expectation of getting a degree. There's time, energy, and money, and if you don't get that degree, all that is wasted. And the most important resource of all of us, time, that's the one thing that is really hurts for us. We spent all that time on getting a degree, or trying to get a degree, and eventually we come up with nothing. That's time we're not going to get back. That could have been spent doing something better and maybe making us even more happy. Constantly having these high expectations can lead to a constant failure of these expectations. This conditions one to expect failure from what they set out to do, and that results in sort of a negative worldview and pessimism towards other people, hurting other people's happiness. And this doesn't just apply to high expectations. Even like a normal expectation can detriment us in a way. Psychologist Barry Schwartz, in a TED Talk that I saw, that I watched, gave a good example of how this is. He, I'll keep going. When we live in this day and age, there's many choices available to us. And so when we choose a product, whether it's a menu item or a certain type of clothing, there are many choices of that. When we choose a certain one and we feel disappointed, it's not the company's fault that caused us to be disappointed. Oh, freak. Can I still go?
As long as you're finished in the next 35 seconds.
Okay, so when we choose a product, from a wide variety of products, and we feel disappointed, whose fault is that? It's not the manufacturer's fault, it's our fault. From having a wide choice of products to choose, feeling disappointed about choosing one, that's our own fault. Because out of like 100 or so products, we chose one that didn't satisfy our expectation. Barry Schwartz goes on to say that he believes that a significant, but not the only thing, but a significant contributor to depression is that people are having experiences that are disappointing because their standards are too high, and then when they have to explain these experiences, they end up blaming themselves. So even having a normal expectation leads to self-blame. So that's why high expectations, and even normal expectations, detriment our pursuit of happiness. That's my argument of why I hope you would think that now low expectations are key to a happy life. Thank you.
All right, Marlos, I thought that the proposition was clearly identified at the beginning, although it's a little bit, vague because you don't really have the clear definition of lower expectations and happy life early on in the presentation. That might make sense to be maybe even your attention device and background information. There's no preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, so that's a little bit problematic from the listener's point of view. Now, you do signpost the points as you get to them, and basically you just had the 2 points that were identifiable, so I appreciated that. And there's a lot of explanation about how you were reasoning, so I think that anybody would understand how you're getting to your conclusions. That's not going to be a problem. The problem is convincing us, given the evidence that you have. Most of your evidence depends on hypothetical examples and invented concepts. You've got one experiment that is referred to, but it sounds to me like you've paraphrased the results of that experiment, and it mostly ends up defining what happiness is for you. The second source that you cite, again, it sounds a little bit like a paraphrase, and it's all of your argument comes down to a pretty simple equation that I heard in a song years ago. Hope for the best, expect the worst. That seems pretty much your philosophy, and I understand that people have that philosophy, but the notion that having high expectations is counterproductive or problematic, I think is really underdeveloped here. I think from the point of view of lowering your expectations, then anytime you exceed it, you feel good. People understand that. I don't think that that's a hard thing to convince us of. The harder thing to convince us of is that we shouldn't be having higher expectations, or that we wouldn't be satisfied if we had high expectations and actually met those expectations. And so I think you need a lot more evidence on that. You do a pretty nice job speaking to the audience and explaining your concepts. I appreciate that. Obviously, you're a little bit over time in the presentation, so that's a minor issue that you would want to take care of by making sure that you rehearse a couple more times. Thank you for volunteering to be first, everybody.